Hey there, athletes. Coach Ferry here from Team Wilpers. Very excited to welcome you to our Week 3 athlete briefing for our Holiday Run Challenge 2023. Hope everyone is having a great Week 2. Let's take a moment to look at these Week 2 workouts and a quick review here. So we started off the week with our VO2 max interval run. So mostly for most of the runners here, 1 minute VO2 max intervals, hitting a fast pace and sustaining them for a relatively short period of time, but enough to certainly start feeling the burn. So what we're working on finding is a little bit faster pace, some power generation, and some efficiency in that stride. Hopefully have some fun with that VO2 max workout. Workout number 2 of our week, our threshold workout. So we're just extending our time from week 1 in that threshold energy zone. Just a quick reminder, these are lengthy periods of work, relatively short recoveries. So we're working on sustaining that endurance race pace for a little bit longer. We're also stretching out the ability to hold that difficult pace for just a longer period of time. That's really a characteristic of that threshold style work. And finally, our key run number 3, our endurance run to finish the week. Hopefully easy, breezy, beautiful, the building blocks of our aerobic engine here. A little bit of housekeeping, as always. So as we continue to go on into this challenge, I not only want you to have fun running, but I want you to go in and check those boxes saying that you completed the workout. Part of this whole challenge I pitched in week 1 is that we want to be accountable to ourselves and we want to be accountable to everybody else, that we're going to do as best as possible to chase that 100% completion percentage. That consistency is the key to unlocking progress in the endurance kingdom. Now, our week 3 workouts here. Run number 1, again, you'll notice a very similar theme this week. VO2 max workout followed by threshold followed by endurance. So VO2 max workout. So there's a slight uptick on this tempo workout, extending those intervals out just a little bit. So 90-second intervals instead of 60. But the principles remain the same. We're pushing this fast pace in order not just to work the VO2 max energy zone, but to extend that stride out, to generate power and continue building efficiency even at the lower paces. So for kickers, working this VO2 max energy zone also is a great way to help improve the result of that 20-minute distance test. So always want to bring it back to that underlying reason. We want to get better, stronger, healthier, happier runners all around. We also want to keep finding progress, chipping away at that 20-minute distance test. So even though there are longer intervals this week, I alluded to in a question from last week, TSS, so I thought I'd bring it back here. Our training stress score is almost an identical training stress score to a week ago. So that was, the time at zone, the amount of recovery, etc. So while our max duration of the interval is a little bit longer, the overall training stress of the workout is almost identical. So hopefully my hopes for you is that you'll certainly even feel stronger this time around getting out there, a little bit more familiarity, hopefully a little bit more comfort with the pace, and that this workout feels even better than week 2. Key run number 2, our threshold run. So just ever so slightly extending our time at zone here. Also just bumping out the time of our max duration interval here in this week 3 threshold workout. As a reminder, this is a pace that should feel like an endurance race pace, sometimes defined as a pace that you could run for 1 hour at maximum, although there are plenty of issues with that definition, but should be certainly something you can hold for the interval without fully tapping yourself out. If you're just gasping for air at the end of this interval, it might be a little bit too hard. It might be more beneficial to actually back the pace off a touch, potentially try that half marathon pace. That's a very high percentage of threshold. If that's too hard, even trying your marathon pace, that's still a very high percentage of threshold. It's going to stimulate what we're trying to stimulate and hopefully give you even a better workout. But if you can push it to that threshold pace, absolutely do it. I mentioned in my week 2 review, the characteristics of these workouts is lengthy intervals, short recoveries, so not an accident there. The threshold pace in general, we're trying to build efficiency around that lactate threshold, that point at which our body can no longer clear lactate. But we're also practicing holding a challenging race pace for an extended period of time. So doing this threshold work, doing these long sustained intervals, physiologically, we're working the lactate threshold. But in terms of running and the tactics involved, we're also practicing being able to sustain and maintain a hard effort for longer durations. It's sort of baked into the style of the threshold workout here. And then, as always, we finish our week with our endurance run or our long run here. It's a nice and easy, relaxed pace. We're going to extend it out a little bit longer this week. So for some people, that might mean relaxing the pace a little bit, trying to make it a bit more comfortable so that you can take it for the extra duration. That's a-okay. The point is not necessarily to maintain any particular pace. The point is to have a genuine, easy effort level and extend it for a longer period of time. So hopefully have some fun with this one here. So I'm gonna jump straight into some questions that came up from the group. So there were a lot of great questions this week. I've got some that are keyed up and ready to go, and then I've got some backups if we have some more time and haven't lost everybody's interest. So we're gonna start with one that actually I've been kind of carrying through for a week because I thought it was an interesting thing all of us can talk about here, which is, the question is, I completed the intermediate 18-week marathon program for NYC Marathon. I did all of the interval workouts and tempo at sometimes faster than prescribed pace based on my 20-minute test, and marathon was projected to be 9:02 pace. However, I did not find this to be something I could imagine doing for 26.2 miles. It was hotter than expected. I held a 9:47 throughout. I think that generates most of the question. Have retested recently and now have an even faster marathon pace. So this is obviously part of a self-paced program. We're here in the challenge, and why it matters for both is because we use that 20-minute test to generate pace targets. We have pace targets for the challenge. We have pace targets for self-paced running plans. So let's talk about pacing, how we find the pacing here, and then how to adjust based upon maybe effort, based upon in-person events, etc. So in starting a training, a challenge, etc., it's important to have a really realistic sense of what your pace ranges are. Those are your zones, your running energy zones coming into it. So we use the 20-minute distance test for that purpose. There are plenty of other people who use plenty of other very valid ways to determine that fitness. So if you've been around this infrastructure for a little bit, I've alluded to in the past, there are some really good things I like about that 20-minute test, and there's some things that I really don't like about the 20-minute test, and it doesn't work for everything all the time. So we'll start with the pro. In our pros and cons list here, here's the pro of the 20-minute test, which is only 20 minutes. So when you think about a threshold test and threshold test in running, the traditional threshold test that I know is a 30-minute test, which makes it a little bit harder, a little bit longer, tougher, especially for intro runners to jump into. So I've brought it up before. Nobody seemed particularly enthused with the 30-minute test, so we stick to the 20. The true threshold test is actually 60 minutes, which I guarantee you no one is enthused about, all the way from very beginner to pro athlete. 60-minute threshold test, that's a doozy, but that is the true threshold test. So part of that kind of pro of the 20-minute test, we can do it a little bit more often, right? It's not a 60-minute test where it's going to really wipe you out for a long time. 20-minute test, really hard effort. Doesn't mean it's not hard, but you should recover relatively quickly and be able to jump back into training. So we can use it as a bit more consistent thing to touch base on fitness, and hopefully not as daunting as a 30 or 60-minute test. However, one of the cons of the 20-minute test is that for any performance test, it matters what the race distance you're performing is. So the performance at a 20-minute test isn't going to necessarily directly correlate to the performance in a marathon the way that the performance in a half marathon will. The performance in a 20-minute test, on the flip side, will give you a much better correlation to a 5K race than maybe your marathon pace translating back down, if that makes sense. Basically, the distance of that test is going to give you a little bit more accuracy for the distance of a similar, or the performance of a similar distance test. But we use the 20-minute distance test, and there are some great things that I think we get from that 20-minute distance test as well. So what we're trying to do when we do it is that we're actually solving for threshold. So all the zones are then based on a percentage of threshold. So what I think these are excellent training paces, or target paces for your workouts in the challenge, workouts on your either half marathon build, marathon build, 5K, 10K, etc. Great training targets, especially to get started with. However, in racing, in even the 20-minute distance test, but marathon in particular, there's an awful lot that goes into it. What is your familiarity with racing? One, what is your familiarity with the race distance? In the marathon, is this your first marathon? 30th marathon. There's a lot learned in the event itself. It's a very tactical, difficult race to figure out. 2, what is the weather like? And the question here mentioned it was a bit warmer than usual. Well, that is a definite performance detractor. You're going to have a negative performance impact on a warm weather day versus a day around 50 degrees, especially similarly with high humidity, high winds, etc. So that's going to be a negative performance impact. Additionally, what is the course like? Is the course a challenging course like maybe New York City, where you have a lot of bridges, hills, etc. baked into the course, or more like the Chicago, London, Berlin, a little bit flatter, faster, more ideal to maintain the high end of that race pace? So looping all the way back, what we get from that 20-minute distance test isn't always necessarily the exact race pace you need to maintain for that workout, but great race and training targets, excuse me, it's great training targets that you can carry through into your training, and then great fitness updates along the way. Excuse me. Never had to clear my throat in the middle of one here. Ultimately, what we get from that 20 minutes test, the training targets, and what I think is a great aspirational pace. So that is a pace based on that test that you didn't necessarily attain in that race, but it doesn't mean that it was impossible to do. It just means it's very difficult to do. So when I say an aspirational pace, that might represent the top end of your ability on a day with an ideal course, ideal weather, a little bit of luck, and when things really all click together, when you're incredibly well trained, well experienced at the race distance. So use that certainly as an aspirational pace. So once again, great percentage of zones, great target for your workout, and great aspirational pace to be pushing towards. Certainly do not think it unrealistic, but definitely takes an awful lot of work. Hopefully that helps. Next question here, regarding threshold VO2 max intervals, when in between sets, what should the main focus be? Nailing prescribed easy pace, even if that means the heart rate is elevated going into the next interval, or should the main priority be getting heart rate down, even if that means walking? Not sure if sacrificing easy pace is best or sacrificing heart rate. Great question here. So the goal of the recovery interval is to genuinely recover in order to be prepared for the next interval. So I'll get to the pace in a second. However, the recovery is not always designed to bring heart rate back down. Sometimes we want to actually keep it up. So for example, let's kind of walk through some of our target energy zones here. On threshold, we've talked about these are long sets, relatively short periods of rest. The goal is endurance based, so we actually don't want the heart rate to settle that much. We have these short little breaks basically to make sure that we don't overshoot threshold, that we don't push into VO2 max and beyond. So we don't want to get to that point where we can no longer clear lactate. So we have those little breaks in there just to try to let things settle. But we don't want heart rate to settle back down to easy. It wants to kind of maintain that high level all the way through those threshold blocks. VO2 max, very different. VO2 max, we're working at a higher level. We intentionally are generating lactate at a pace in which the body can't clear. So we need to take breaks in order to allow our muscles to clear that, in order to get our breath back a little bit so that we can jump back in and give another really strong effort. Similarly, anaerobic capacity, even higher effort. So it's going to take even more recovery to get ready to go back at it and give another really strong effort again. You know, kind of working in these zones, especially these high zones, you can't train VO2 max without getting to VO2 max. You can't train anaerobic capacity without being at that pace. So as adult athletes, see it so commonly, people reduce all the paces to be able to sustain it across all the intervals, while in those energy zones in particular, it's kind of above threshold energy zones, it's much better to go all the way to the limit and have to shorten the intervals because you can't do anymore, than to try to do 90% of the target in order to do all the intervals. So we have to kind of retrain our thinking sometimes on those efforts. That being said, across all energy zones, there are some things that I think apply universally here. And one, it's the pace of that recovery interval is not very important. So we certainly write it as easy pace, but if you need to run and I'll get to the run versus walk in a second, but if you need to run slower than your easy pace range, it's 100% fine. Take it down to a shuffle jog, whatever feels comfortable for you to be able to get a bit of a reprieve and get ready to tackle that next interval. So, I mentioned I want you to maintain the run. So that does matter. And the reason it matters is that when your heart rate is elevated, you're in mid-run and you come to that recovery, but especially while you're running, your heart rate is beating, it's sending blood to your lungs to pick up oxygen, deliver it to the rest of the body. So when you go into those recovery intervals, your heart rate is going to drop a little bit most likely. And the more you slow down, the more it drops. If you go to a walk, it drops very rapidly. So what happens at that point actually is your body's kind of going into recovery mode immediately. Even it doesn't know you have more intervals to go. It's going into recovery mode. So it's taking all that blood that's been in the core and it's going to push out to the muscles to try to repair basically all that work, that hard work that your legs are doing. Then when you're trying to get back into running, it's got to kind of reverse course, bring all the blood back from the legs up into the core. So I'm sure everyone has at some point experienced that heavy-legged feeling from trying to get restarted again after going to a walk in their run. That's why. It ultimately is actually, it's better if possible, and not always possible. Occasionally you just need a walk and that is what it is. But it is better if possible to maintain just a light jog. It'll bring your heart rate down a little bit more gradually, and it's going to actually make that return to pace a little bit easier when you want to jump back into that next hard interval. So try as best as possible. But to reiterate one more time, if you need to keep a jog lower than the easy pace of that kind of prescribed easy pace recovery, that is 100% fine, whatever feels comfortable in that time. Our next question here was, can you talk a bit about pace, variations between indoor training and outdoor training? What is reasonable to expect and why? So another great question. Great questions across the board this week. Great question, especially coming in this time of year where a lot of people are transitioning from outside to inside. So, unfortunately, I don't have an amazing answer. And the reason I don't have an amazing answer is that there are just so many variables in play here. I would say the main one is that every treadmill I feel like I've ever been on is calibrated a little bit differently. Even if you have the same make, model, etc., they're just a little bit different. So some are going to feel a little bit easier than running outside. Some, many feel much harder than running outside, etc. What is, kind of universally known and agreed upon is that heart rate on a treadmill tends to be higher than heart rate outside. So if we equate heart rate into effort a little bit harder on the treadmill than running outside. What that has to do with is there's no airflow. When you're running outside, you're creating, air moving over your skin to help cool your body naturally. So you can certainly set up a lot of fans. It's going to maybe negate that a little bit, but there are also not a lot of treadmills set in rooms around 50 degrees, which is the ideal running temp. So not that everyone runs in 50 degrees year round. However, if you have a cool running opportunity, it's going to certainly be a little bit easier than running somewhere between 70 to 80 degrees, based upon what you like your indoor temp to be. What you can do to try to make sure you're balancing as best as possible, let's start with some technological ideas, some tech to help you. What I would say, a lot of us have Garmin, Apple watches, other brands of watches. They do, basically examples of indoor running. We're going to say this is a bad way to do it. Not a good way. I'm sure many people have experienced. They don't do a good job at all of trying to equate that outdoor pace to inside. So don't go by that. Stride, Zwift foot pods, actually a little bit better. Not perfect, but a little bit better because they're actually mounted on your feet. They can much better measure stride length, which is actually a pretty great representation of how far you're running. So if you want to use a piece of tech to try to better measure your indoor effort or outdoor effort indoor, one of those foot pod solutions might be a good one. Heart rate monitors. So a lot of us have heart rate monitors. So you certainly could look at your data, look at your average heart rate outside, both for easy runs, both for target pace runs, and try to translate some of those heart rate targets to inside. If you're, just for example's sake, if you're constantly at 150, running easy outside at a zone 2, and you get on the treadmill and you're running 2 miles an hour slower than you do outside, but you're already at 150 beats a minute, might be an okay spot to stay. I personally am usually much, much slower indoors than outdoors. I try to match effort. We'll get to that in one sec. To finish up heart rate, one thing that is crucial, if you plan to really use heart rate to dictate any of your training measures, so you have to upgrade your game from the wrist-based heart rate. It's just simply not accurate, it's not consistent, and if you're gonna use it as a primary training metric, either a chest strap, there's some very good arm straps out there at the moment, but the wrist base is just not accurate enough to do, really plan your training around. So look into that. Effort, I started talking about effort. This is kind of the RPE scale of what does it feel like outside, what does it feel like inside. To be honest, this is one of the only ways, I'll not take it back. I have used a foot pod inside, but 99 out of 100 times, I'm matching effort from outside to inside. And as I mentioned, my pace is significantly slower on a treadmill than running outside on road, track, trail, etc. So I'm just trying to come in and if you really want targets and you want something to be comparable, run the workouts. And I imagine you're gonna start feeling what feels similar. And those actual mile per hour targets that you get on a tread, you'll start to notice there's a lot of repetition, that you get the same feel at a certain mile per hour, and it might be far off from what you're running outside. However, set yourself new pace targets based upon that RPE scale, or just trying to match effort, and then go back after it and utilize it for workouts. And if it starts feeling a little bit more comfortable, because there's also some familiarity with running on a belt, just bump it up a little bit at a time. Just move those efforts a little bit forward, bit by bit. That'd be a great way to go about it. But probably my number one piece of advice when trying to match these paces inside to outside, outside to inside, etc., is don't fixate on it. I have seen so many runners spend their time, their money, their energy trying to figure out exactly how to match, a few seconds back or forth either way across these technologies. And the better way is just to relax a little bit, have fun with your run. I sure would rather you spend that time doing almost anything else than really just fixating on this. You'd certainly be much better off spending that time actually running, spending your time doing some recovery, etc. So don't get too worked up in it. It'll be okay. Well, we're 23 minutes in, and we'll make sure we stop short of 30, but I was going to go to some of these questions that I wanted to wait and see how much time we had for. Some of them I'll definitely carry through into next week because there are some more great ones here. So there's a question from Diane DeVito here. It said, for 2-a-days, strength and run in one day, how do you recommend structuring the day? Do the workouts back to back, one in the morning, one later in the day? Should we run first, strength second, or can we do strength first, run second, etc.? So great workout, run strength same day, what do you do? So I have a pretty strong opinion about this, and I have at least run it by our other strength coaches, our other coaches. We share in the opinion at least, but I'm sure everyone will have a little bit of their own. On strength days in particular, they pair with our kind of easy run day, our sort of most supplemental easy run days. So when I want athletes going into a strength workout, I want them to be as fresh as humanly possible. Strength after cardio, no bueno in my book. I want athletes to be very, very focused on that strength. When that allows you to do the heaviest weights you can do possible, to be as stable as possible. That is the marquee workout of that day, and it's a reason that we don't pair it on the more up-tempo workouts. In terms of how far after the workout, it's going to be a little bit based on your schedule, and it's going to be a little bit based on your overall experience with it. The strength workouts that we recommend, I would say, take 30, maybe 40 minutes to get through the entire thing, depending upon what week and how many reps we're doing. And then those workouts are around 30, 45 minutes total. So it is my ideal in that scenario to do the strength workout, and almost immediately following is to go into that easy run. And your legs might be tired. And guess what the best possible solution is for that? Slow your pace down. It was an easy endurance run to begin with. It's probably the number one workout that's poorly paced. Just the easy run should be the easiest one. But there's some real ideology about doing that strength workout, firing up those muscles, getting them really engaged, and then going into a little bit of your sport of choice. And obviously ours is running. So you can feel those muscles become immediately engaged, really get into the body of it. Otherwise, it's not bad to wait 4 or 5 hours, do that run a little bit later in the day. Just requires, you still have to go through a warm up to get your body ready. It's cooled down, everything is contracted. So you've got to make sure you go through that process again. And similarly, you have to spend the time, really cooling down, because even though it was an easy effort, you're still very active. It's still 30 minutes of running. It's still thousands of footfalls that go into that workout. So it just takes a little bit more time overall to space it out and putting it together, but can be done. Hopefully that helps there. Quick question here as we move into the cold weather months. It said, shared a great graphic, Team Wilper shared a great graphic on preparing for outdoor running in the cold. Can you expand on the unique challenge of cold weather running, especially how it impacts paces? I expect with the Bama summer heat and humidity, but I was surprised that cold temps can cause a similar struggle. So absolutely, temps, when you start getting less than 50 degrees, do have a negative performance impact in a similar but very different way than the hot weather running. A couple quick things that come to mind. A lot of people have breathing issues in the cold weather. We'll talk about teeth hurting, lungs hurting from that cold air. So if that is a particular issue, there are certainly ways to do a slight cover over your face while you run. Through our lockdown months, the buff got very popular. The, just face mask in general, anything to just slightly avert that, frigid ice cold air from coming in, using a little bit of warmth from your breath to kind of warm it up, protect that a little bit. So one idea. Also, it takes a lot longer to warm up in the cold. So we talk a lot, certainly put in every single key workout, that lunge matrix to get to move in 3 planes of motion to get your body ready. We certainly include that warm up time to hopefully try to ramp up to readiness to get ready for those workouts. In the cold weather, it just simply takes longer. Your muscles do not warm up in quite the same way. So you have to allow more time, and it's different for each of us. And it's a little bit different for, as age comes upon us all as well, where, it used to take me 5 minutes for every workout and I was in it. Now I'm much more 20, 30 minutes before I really feel like I'm in the main set of my workout. So I really allow myself extra time. So we not only have that easy pace range where it's 100% to start low in the range, but very similar to the recoveries. If you need to start easier than that easy pace range and just slowly move into it to get your body ready, then absolutely do it. But do make sure that you allow more time to warm up in the cool weather. Finally, as soon as it goes beneath 32 degrees, the ground is harder. It freezes just like everything else. So it is harder. What also freezes is the bottom of your shoes, especially the longer you're out there. The actual foam on those shoes, especially as we drop down into the teens and those single-digit temperatures, it freezes just like everything else. So you're not getting the energy return or the cushion that you're used to running indoors, running in warmer weather, running basically anything over 32 degrees. You're just not getting that same return. So the apparel makes a huge difference. And I think that was the graphic, talked a lot about just how to layer up, keep yourself comfortable out there. But making sure you warm up, longer, allow more time, give yourself some leniency of getting into the workout. Be thoughtful that those cool temps really do take, put more impact, more kind of hard landings onto the body. And 3, it's certainly consider using something to kind of cover your mouth for at least sections of the workout, especially if you have a hard time breathing in these cold weather temps. And otherwise, it is 6:30 Eastern time here on the dot, so I don't want to take any more time. There were a few questions, unfortunately, I didn't get to. They were excellent. I'll certainly try to carry those through to next week, also answer them in the thread here in the meantime. Thanks to everyone for tuning in here. It's always a blast to have you here on a Friday evening. And good luck on week 3, and we'll see you here next week. Have a great one.